1,995 people have been evacuated from the flooding area of the Novakhovka dam breach, including 103 children. A total of 20 settlements were flooded. That includes 2,629 houses. This is on the right bank of the Dnipro River, on the Kherson side of the Dnipro River. At the same time that evacuations have been happening, and they are very difficult to perform waist deep in water, sometimes even deeper, Russians have been shelling the evacuation efforts, shelling Kherson and the other settlements, as well as the evacuation convoys. All of the material you see here is from the Novakhovka flooding area in the past 24 hours. In this video you can see Ukrainian dogs being rescued. They're afraid and tired because some of them have been in water for the last 48 hours. They're cold, some of them cannot move anymore due to stiffness, and every hour that goes by, it is harder to find surviving animals. On this photo you can see the satellite image and video of the flooding. In this clip we can see a Ukrainian drone delivering drinking water to a Russian-occupied sister settlement of Kherson on the other side of Dnipro River. It's called Oleshki. A citizen of Oleshki on the rooftop getting drinking water from a Ukrainian drone. Because you don't really drink the river water, and the plumbing doesn't work because it's flooded. Where do you get the drinking water? Of course, it has to be delivered by drones or by boats. And all of the boats are busy with evacuating people. So actually getting food and water is one of the biggest issues there right now. A lot more information has come out about the destruction of the Novakhovka dam, and in this video we'll go over all of it. In this video you can see Russian soldiers on the Russian occupied side of the Dnipro River waist deep in water. The thing is, Russian infantry who held a lot of positions, they had trench lines, dug-ins, foxholes, ammunition, everything, they were not warned. The water was unleashed upon them. But you know who was warned? The armored forces. The Russian armored forces were warned. Ukrainian intelligence services have recorded calls of Russian armored units being warned about the destruction of this dam to move their armor away, because in Russia a soldier's life is worth nothing, but a BTR is at least worth something to them. So they moved the BTRs, BMPs and tanks out of the way, and they left the soldiers. Some of the soldiers were able to get out waist deep in water. Some of the soldiers are still trapped, and some of the Russian soldiers drowned. That shows how little they care. A lot of the comments in my previous video say that it might have been the Ukrainians, and then I see a lot of Western media and I see those headlines saying that it might have been the Ukrainians who blew up the dam. In this video I'll share with you my thoughts why it wasn't the Ukrainians, and of course you'll feel free to debate me in the comments. I will read your comments, but listen through these reasons first. Let's face it, after a night with drinks I don't bounce back the next day like I used to. I have to make a choice. I can either have a great night or a great next day. That is, until I found Z-Biotics. Z-Biotics pre-alcohol probiotic is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. Z-Biotics produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. It's designed to work like your liver, but in your gut, where you need it the most. Just remember to drink Z-Biotics before drinking alcohol, drink responsibly, and get a good night's sleep to feel your best tomorrow. I am a musician. I play the accordion and sing folk songs, and sometimes that includes having occasional drinks with my buddies. The first time I tried Z-Biotics was at one of those sing-along parties. As instructed, I drank a bottle of Z-Biotics before any alcohol. I was amazed at how good I felt the next day. Give Z-Biotics a try for yourself. Go to zbiotics.com/Estonian69 or scan the QR code on the screen right now to get 15% off your first order when you use the code Estonian69 at checkout. Z-Biotics is backed with 100% money-back guarantee, so if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund you your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/Estonian69 and use the code Estonian69 at checkout for 15% off. Thank you Z-Biotics for sponsoring this video. Breaking a dam of a river almost always benefits the defender. It will be a big hindrance to the attacking force who has to cross a huge water body after the breach of the dam. Well, in this case, the defender is the Russian side. Ukraine became the attacking side when they took Kherson and the surrounding areas. They were the offensive side, and they still are. In the light of the upcoming counter-offensive, Ukraine is the attacking side. It wouldn't make sense for Russia, for defensive purposes, to blow up this dam, because they need the reserves that are right now meant to protect the Russian-occupied side of the Dnipro. All of those reserves and the armored vehicles, they need those in other fronts, the southern front, for example, where things have gone extremely crazy in the last 24 hours. We'll go into it later this video. Now that the dam has flooded all of the downstream Dnieper area, Ukrainians physically cannot attack over it. It is not possible, and Russians are free to move tens of thousands of men away from that front to bolster the southern front or the Donetsk front. Militarily, the breach of this dam benefits Russia greatly. The damage done by the destruction of this dam to the infrastructure, 20 settlements, Kherson, 2,600 houses, 3 Ukrainian oblasts, it is so vast. It wouldn't make sense for Ukraine to do this in any way. Ukrainian government has not shown this Stalinistic behavior towards its own people. This destructive behavior. This is more like the Russian style. So why would they do it now? Ukrainian main export to the world is grain, agricultural products. 3 of the main oblasts producing grain in Ukraine got their water from the reservoir of Novakhovka, which is now empty. So these 3 oblasts for the next few years cannot produce anything. No grain, no export, no money for the military. For Ukraine to do this, it would not make sense economically, militarily, in any way for Ukraine to blow this dam, because they cannot sell grain anymore. They need to sell grain to get money for the military. Another reason is that Russians closed all of the valves sometime before the destruction of the dam. So the water level rose to a staggering 17.5 meters. They rose it on purpose to build up the pressure, so if the dam would be destroyed, the high water would do more damage downstream. This is done on purpose. Why would they close the valves otherwise? Another reason is that dealing with the evacuation process, delivering food and water and shelter and medical aid to the people of those 20 settlements flooded, I mean, this all is done by the Ukrainian army. Ukrainian army who needs to prepare for the upcoming counteroffensive. The counteroffensive will come, but this is a great obstacle on its way for a moment. Ukraine would not do this, shoot themselves in the foot like that. Ukraine has demonstrated a great ability to think ahead. This doesn't have Ukrainian handwriting on it. They now are dealing with saving the civilian population, evacuations, animal evacuations, instead of preparing for the counteroffensive. There is no way in hell Ukraine did this. And the last reason is that it is a scorched earth tactic. A tactic we have seen Russian Empire use almost in any war. They have been the retreating side. In any battle they have used the scorched earth tactic, giving no care about the civilian population, loss or suffering, about the destruction of infrastructure. That doesn't matter to them. Scorched earth is all that matters. It has Russian handwriting on it left and right. In my eyes it's clear. But I'll be sure to read your comments if you think otherwise. Put them in the comments and I'll see what you think. Here we have the Russian losses of the past 24 hours. And later in this video we'll go into some offensive operations by the Ukrainian army. I mean, Russian military channels are panicking right now. Something huge is happening in the south, on the southern front. And this already reflects in these losses. 730 KIAs, almost 2 battalion tactical groups per day. Insanely big losses. We're talking about losses as big as when Russia was pushing in Bakhmut. The heights of these attacks. 18 tanks. Russia hasn't lost this many tanks in a single day for at least, I think, 1.5 to 2 months. 16 armored personnel vehicles. This shows that something big is happening somewhere. Russians don't deploy their armor very much anymore because they are saving it for the counteroffensive. They're expecting Ukrainian attacks everywhere. They don't use those in offensive operations. If they're losing those, that means Ukraine is striking somewhere where Russian armor is in their way. These losses here tell me Ukrainians are up to something. 28 artillery systems. This shows that Ukraine is hunting for these artillery systems. Russian artillery is very destructive for Ukrainian civilian population. Well, because Russian artillery bombards the civilian population. Because their artillery, first of all, is not precise. So it lands wherever it lands, and if it's a populated area, somebody will get hit. And second of all, they do bombard civilian areas for that reason. 3 anti-aircraft warfare systems, as I said in the previous video, these numbers here, if they're anything more than a 0, is a huge victory for Ukraine, because these systems are incredibly expensive and, as of now, impossible to produce in Russia due to sanctions, because they had a lot of Western components in them, a very high number. Ukrainians, again, are hunting those high-value targets. Tank compared to anti-aircraft system is not a high-value target. 15 UAVs lost, 35 vehicles and fuel tanks. Now this is a very high number. Something definitely is happening. And 8 special equipment. Now these are, for example, radar systems, jamming equipment. Also very expensive, very high tech, and something that Russia cannot replace. Numbers are astonishingly high, and later in this video we actually have proof why they're so high. This is the military map, and something very big is happening on the southern front. This area here, starting from this water body down to the Black Sea, is all flooded. Nothing can go through all of this length. Let's measure how much is it. It's about 270 kilometers, nothing can go through, and all of Russian reserves are moving away to the southern front from these flooded areas, going to defend the southern front or the eastern front, because Russia needs it, because in the past 24 hours it has really started to explode in the southern front. South from Rehi, Russian Telegram channels are reporting that Ukraine striked Russian trenches, with HIMARS. Ukrainians only use HIMARS to high-value targets because HIMARS missiles are expensive and incredibly precise, so they wouldn't use them to strike trench systems. Usually Ukrainians use for trench systems Western artillery, Soviet-made Grad systems, stuff like that, but now they used HIMARS for infantry trench systems. Why? And this happened many hours in a row, and it wasn't only HIMARS, it was also artillery, and then Russian Telegram channels in panic stated that Ukrainian tanks were rolling in the south or south of Rehi. Strikes happening on this area, and there are reports that Ukrainians have captured the first Russian positions on high ground south of Rehi. The bombardment lasted all night, and by 5 a.m. these positions were captured. Russians are calling it the counteroffensive. Of course they are. The panic is real, the fear is real. Anything that is a slight attack is a counteroffensive in their eyes. Ukrainians are of course silent. I don't think this is it. This is a probing attack. Ukrainians are finding weaknesses in the Russian lines, in the whole of Russian lines. Ukrainian reserves right now are deployed in a way that they can be moved to the eastern front, they can be moved to the southern front, anywhere where it's necessary. Anywhere Ukrainians find any weaknesses in the Russian lines, they can push their reserves there and start the offensive. So this is finding the weaknesses. Another area where Ukrainians were pushing heavily tonight was Velika Novosilka. It was also 2 days ago where battles were happening. These 3 settlements, Novodarivka, Neskuchne and Novodonetsk, these settlements have been liberated by the latest information, but it doesn't show on this map. And Ukrainians are pushing here, also finding Russian weaknesses. Attacking already from two different locations. Of course, Russians want to move their reserves away from the Dnipro front to the southern front. But that is not it, because Ukrainians are also attacking on the flanks of Bakhmut. My friends, I have made some surprises for you in my merch store, Ukrainian themed merch. It will be really cool and I'll be wearing them. I hope so will you. Go and check out estoniansoldier.com, link is in the description below. Get some cool merch to show that you support Ukraine. When we meet, we'll be wearing the same hat or the same shirt. Well, my right arm will have the Ukrainian trident on it. They look really awesome. As you can see, we can see the blue arrows, and Berkivka was liberated 2 days ago. Russian Telegram channels are leaking that Russian flanks in Bakhmut are really weak. Bakhmut itself is strong, but Russian flanks are weak, and Ukrainians are using those weaknesses, striking the flanks. Now we have information that Russians are gathering a lot of reserves to defend Bakhmut, the city, not the flanks. For some reason, a lot of reserves moving into this area. Russians cannot lose Bakhmut because they lost so many troops, equipment, so many offensive capabilities to take this settlement. It was a political order, and losing it would mean losing the war. Bakhmut was the main place of attack, the main goal. If Ukrainians take this back by exploiting the weak flanks of the city. I think this will trigger some inside tension in the Russian army and in Kremlin. So we see Ukrainian attacks on Rehi front, then on Novodonetsk right here, and then on Bakhmut. 3 different locations, 2 of the south and 1 of the eastern areas, exploiting Russian weak spots, finding them, and perhaps then funneling reserves into it, starting the counteroffensive. Time will tell what will happen, but the fact is Ukrainians have ramped up their offensive operations in the last 24 hours, nothing we have seen in the last few months. What has been happening in the Russian-occupied rear areas? Well, it has been exploding heavily in Melitopol in the last 48 hours. In Tokmak, right here, it has been explosions. In the last 12 hours, there were huge explosions here. Mainly the railway was targeted by Ukrainians. And also in Luhansk city, right here in the east. Ukrainians are striking all of the Russian-occupied rear, and now they're starting offensive operations on the front line. Russians are under heavy pressure. And that's, in this light, it makes sense to blow up the dam, to get some pressure off of them, to give Ukrainians something to occupy their minds with and their army with. This is a Russian scream for help. It shows the Russian panic. They do anything to get out of this situation. But it's too late. The counteroffensive is coming. Now we'll watch a video that comes from an interview with Prigozhin. The interview is 1 hour long, but of course we'll watch only a short clip of it. Video translated by Dmitry. And here he says that Russian government and leadership might be stupid enough to answer with nuclear weapons to the Belgorod incursion, to place nuclear weapons into Belgorod. Seeing Russians blow up the dam, I'm not sure if I know how stupid they are. They might be more stupid than I know. I'll translate. And in general, did you do the meeting? Have you ever done any actions that will determine whether the army is ready for it? Have you done ammunition accumulations? Why didn't they ask for martial law? You could have come and spoken in the State Duma and said, esteemed deputies, we have failed. No, but Prigozhin doesn't maybe understand. You cannot do this. I read an article about giving news to Putin, how he likes it. Putin is a very traumatized person. He cannot take negative news. That's an issue. It's not like he doesn't like to hear it. It's that he cannot take it. He cannot handle the situation, and that's why nobody's giving him negative news. And everybody who is doing it or who has done it in the duration of this war has lost his position, has been put to jail, has been fallen out of the window. A journalist who has seen the process of delivering information to Putin daily commented about this, that negative news given to Putin is sugar-coated very heavily or not talked about at all, and the small minor positive things that happen to the Russian army in Ukraine are very heavily over-exaggerated. So Putin only hears about the minor successes but not about the major fails. So what Prigozhin is saying, that you should have talked to State Duma and talk about the situation in Belgorod, you cannot do it. And this is why we don't see an adequate reaction from the Russian leadership about the Belgorod incursion, is because nobody can give the real information to the leadership. Because the censor is real. Putin doesn't want to hear it. We're totally screwed. Martial law should be imposed. And the third point is that to hand over to the enemy of the territory of the Russian Federation, which you have recognized under the Constitution, isn't that a sin, which is considerably higher than a single life sentence? I think it is. So now Prigozhin is over the corner criticizing the leadership, who is doing nothing. Because we haven't seen almost any reaction to the incursion of Belgorod. By now, probably the Svoboda Rossiya units have pulled out, because yesterday we got a compilation video from them of the incursion, and they wouldn't release this video if the operation wouldn't be over, because otherwise they would relieve their positions. So it's probably over, but not for the fact that Russia drove them out, for the fact that they pulled out themselves. Russian response was incredibly weak. They sent conscripts to deal with it, and those conscripts were taken prisoner. And now Prigozhin is stating that this is the greatest crime, to ignore this, a crime that Putin is committing right now, in his eyes. That's why today in the Belgorod region, the enemy is slowly moving toward Russia, where we can throw the bomb. I think they have one criminal idea on the brain right now. If we throw a bomb on a foreign country, they'll throw the same kind of bomb at us. Of course they won't. There's a joke in the military that now the two safest places in the country, this is the headquarters in Rostov and the headquarters at Frunzhanskaya where Shoigu is, because the enemies will never strike there because they are two holy places. Because if two people are destroyed, we might end up winning the war. This is the great joke on the Russians. If Shoigu would be killed, Russia might win this war, meaning that, as Napoleon said, never interrupt your enemy when he's making the mistake. Shoigu is one of the greatest mistakes of the Russian army. He makes decisions so bad, you cannot compare them with anything that has happening in the military history before. And Ukrainians know this. In Ukrainian interest is to keep Shoigu as the head of the Russian military, because he is incredibly incompetent. A perfect leader for the Russian army for Ukrainians. An incompetent... So Prigozhin said that for the enemy, this is a holy place not to strike, because we don't want to kill Shoigu. Prigozhin has a sense of humor. That's how I'm afraid they might have underlying thoughts. Throw a nuclear bomb on our territory. And isn't that why we're retreating in Belgorod? Letting them move forward? Scared to throw a bomb at someone else's territory, but we'll throw at ours. Let's show how smart and mentally ill we are. I mean, he's mocking the Russian leadership. Prigozhin is openly humiliating the Russian leadership. Shoigu also represents Putin, so he's mocking Putin. I think Putin has created a monster. Prigozhin is not under Putin's control anymore. And I think if Putin wants to take him out, he cannot, because Prigozhin's security, his private army is the biggest in Ukraine and the biggest in Russia. His security is good. Very soon Putin might have to worry about his own security. We'll watch another very short clip from this 1 hour long interview with Prigozhin, where he states that Russian designed units, special forces, are now replenished with anyone. And he illustrates some more issues with the Russian army and its system. This means a long, deep preparation, interaction in order for formed units to work collectively. He's talking about the training of the VDV or the designed units. Training those units takes incredibly long, it's very expensive, and they are special forces. And Russia lost, in the first 3 days of war, Russia lost about 50% of those forces because they used them incredibly stupidly. The minimum team is a company, so you have to go through single training, unit cohesion of the squads, of platoons, then companies, and only then a soldier can be released to the war, when he understands something. What's going on today is that the units are all mixed up like this, and we still have the leadership that makes military decisions. These people are absolutely, totally useless. At the military level, they are illiterate, who, in addition to not knowing what to do, they are destroying what was once created. Talking about the system of how Russia replenishes the troops. Russian army has always been like that. Russian standing army before the war was also working like that. In every squad, half of the squad members were conscripts and half were regular army. In this way, the regular army units would keep up the conscripts, utilizing a huge population, making sure that the conscript army would give the population to the standing army and that the standing army would give the knowledge to the conscript army, mixing them. It has always been the case, but in this war we can see the negative effects of this. It doesn't work, and Prigozhin sees it and describes it. There was a unified structure of the airborne forces. This is the Desantniks, what I was talking about. The airborne forces perform certain tasks. They must capture some sort of foothold. Before they run out of ammo, other units should arrive. This was the goal of taking the Kiev airport at the first days of war, and they flew in about 10 helicopters of Desantniks. About 100 Desantniks landed in the airfield, and I was in Kiev. We watched and talked to Operator Starsky. He told me everything about the battle. These airborne units were surrounded by Ukrainian city police and killed throughout the night, one by one, picked out and killed. And the rest of the helicopters were shot down. And Russia lost a lot of units, which training took years, over decades. And to replenish those forces now, it might take decades. Now we have the airborne forces as infantry, defending some territories. These airborne forces are replenished with mechanized infantry, draftees, literally anyone, meaning that Russian Desantniks, special forces, it's just a word. They don't have the capabilities, they don't have the training, nothing is left of the illusion that they are strong and they are almighty and Russian Spetsnaz can do anything. Nothing is left. This illusion is empty. The picture is broken. To create a bubble that there are supposedly some people there. And insofar as the leadership is not present on the ground at all, they don't care. They have concept. There is regiment, and there could be 4,000 men in that regiment, or 2,000 or 200. They don't care at all. So for the Russian leadership, it's only important to have a regiment, to have a unit on paper. It doesn't matter how many people in that unit. As we can see, Russia is going back to the planned economy, and in planned economy, planned leading style, you just need to have the plan. I have these 5 regiments, send them to war. This is a plan on paper. In reality, those 5 regiments are filled only with 2,200 men, which is like 10%, let's say, of its capability that it should have, but they don't care. And if you go to war with these plans, I mean, no plan survives the first shot. That is what we know from the USA military. But all Russian military has is plans, so this shows their greatest weakness. And now, my friends, the time has come for me to butcher some patron names. I will use my Estonian heritage and my Estonian pronunciation to make your names as ill-sounding as possible. Tier 10 and above, and I'll be butchering your name. Tomiev, Nan Smid, Oledor Son Vikinge, Justin Habk, Brandon Briz. Thank you to these 5 people. If you like my channel, then the Patreon link is in the description below. Also, if you want news, short-term compact news 3 times a day about this Russo-Ukrainian war, most important news, my Twitter account is in the description below. Go and check it out. Also check out my Instagram, also in the description below. Photos about my personal life, when I'm hiking, when I'm shooting some guns, because I do that in there. I'll see you there. Until my next video, my friends. Slava Ukraini. 38. Oh, we came.